Welcome back, viewers. You're joining us in our discussion on migration, human trafficking, and slavery, and how it has become prevalent over the last couple of months. And my guest is Madam Sylvia Lopez-Ekra, who is the country representative for the International Organization of Migration. Sylvia, before we went on break, you gave a very vivid and chilling description of the hazards and the dangers that migrants face on their route through the Sahara into Libya, and in an attempt to cross the Mediterranean and to go abroad. Obviously, this is facilitated by criminal networks, because it is criminal networks of people involved in human trafficking who are taking the people from Agadez across the Sahara, especially on that leg of the journey across the Sahara into Libya, and then getting them onto the vessels. How, from the experience and from the observations of the International Organization for Migration, how integrated do you think these criminal networks are? And what kind of cooperation do you think has to be exercised by both ECOWAS member states, states from the Northern African countries, as well as the European Union, in order to be able to break these criminal human trafficking networks, and therefore to, as it were, do away with the facilitation that allows this to happen?
I think in terms of actors involved along the way, it goes from the very small actor to the very big fishes. You have really a very diverse pool of people intervening, and what they're doing is that they're preying on the hopes and the will of the migrants to reach Europe. So that's how they're making their money. And you will have all sorts of gangs, criminal networks that are doing also other things. That's the thing with transnational crime. It's very often not just one, and we cannot let criminal activities thrive because they diversify. So there's a lot of connection between different criminal activities. And we see, I often hear, especially recently after the videos, the CNN, there's this polarization sometimes of talking about racism and talking about xenophobia, but the money also doesn't have a color. We have some West Africans that are involved in this. Some of them are working against their will because they have to repay for their own freedom. Others are working to make money. So we really have a multiplicity of actors involved in those operations. And I think the best way to approach this, to dismantle the networks, is first of all to increase the law enforcement aspect. There is a need to have intelligence. The criminal networks, they're very well organized, they have resources, and the only way to be able to address them is to match that. So the need for coordination and the need for resources is there. How to gather intelligence in a timely manner that you can react on the spot to operations that are being planned by the criminal network. So there's has been a lot of capacity building going on from the IOM side, but this is definitely something that goes well beyond the IOM mandate. There is a need for other agencies from the UN, but also the governments to work together, and I think that's one of the key priorities for the UN EU task force that has been put in place to see how we can support the Libyan authorities to beef up the law enforcement aspect of this, to dismantle those networks, to make sure that we don't let Libya deal with this problem, because definitely there is a need for a whole of society approach.
Well, Libya can't deal with this problem alone. I mean, I don't think that anybody is under any illusions that the state of Libya, as is currently managed, will be able or has the capacity to be able to deal with this issue. ECOWAS has a mediation and security council, and indeed ECOWAS has security cooperation across the 15 member states. because of that security cooperation, there's engagement on a variety of issues. And perhaps right now, human trafficking has to be one of the issues that is put on top of the agenda in order to be able to deal with this particular menace, especially as far as movement of people across the West African region is concerned. Because without being able to deal with that in any constructive way, I think that you are going to continue to be saving people when, as a matter of fact, what we should be looking to do is to shut down the networks. There's also this issue of formalizing the pathways for migration. Because the fact of the matter is that there is irregular migration because people don't see that there's the opportunity to go about this in a structured manner. Now, from the EU-AU summit that took place in Abidjan, because of the focus on the youth, and especially now that they are working together with the United Nations, from the experience of IOM, how have you been able to manage regular, formal, structured migration programs where there's the opportunity for people to come, but there's also the opportunity for people to go after a period of time? Because perhaps it is that kind of structure that needs to be created so as to allow for the opportunity for people to live legitimately and not be trying to find every other means of being able to get to any EU member state to be able to create a better life. What has been the experience previously with your organization?
That is a critical question, and actually in February this year at the follow-up meeting to Valletta, IOM was pushing for three things: legal channels of migration, protection, and the centrality of human rights. And I think we cannot have a comprehensive management of this and really go to the heart of the matter without talking about legal channels of migration as part of this conversation. Because what is the credible alternative to irregular migration? And I think it comes with campaigns, giving the information to the young people so that they know the dangers, and we are working on that. Livelihood, because the young people will tell you, I'm going because I don't have a job here. I don't have prospects. I have lost that hope and that confidence that I can make it here. And then finally, legal ways to go. And I know it's always a difficult element of the conversation, but it has to be there as part of the conversation, because there is opportunities in the labor market of some European countries for migrants and for migrant labor. There are gaps that can be filled by migrant labor, and our Director General is very often talking about the need for even care for a population that is getting older and older in Europe. So we have to think about creative ways of opening legal channels of migration and creative ways that are responsive also to the labor market needs in Europe. We had a very interesting pilot project in Ghana a few years ago, where we had a circular migration project between Ghana and Italy. We sent some farmers to Italy, and there they had exposure to new ways of farming. They had, of course, the opportunity to get a good salary, but they also got exposure to financial literacy. And when they came back to Ghana, because all of them came back, they could reinvest that money into their own farming activities, and it was a very positive experience. And I think pilot projects like this have to be reinstated, have to be tested again. There is a lot of distrust, I think, around the idea that if people go, they will not come back. And we've seen that. But I think if we, all actors, put our heads together, we can find win-win-win. So migrants, country of origin, country of destination solutions that would definitely open legal channels, and not just for the highly skilled, not just for the students, and not just for the business people, but also for low-skilled workers. I think we can get there.
How much of the irregular migration activities that is taking place do you think within our region, within the West African region, is attributable to climate change? And given that as a result of the Paris Agreement, was not only the commitment for countries to be able to make nationally determined commitments to deal with climate change, there was also the promise of support to deal with those challenges. And do you think that there are creative ways of somehow factoring that climate change discussion into a conversation on creating legal paths for migration?
I think climate change is definitely having an impact in the region and in Ghana. It's already here, it's very real. A lot of the regions where we're seeing migration out of the communities are regions that are surviving on agriculture. And that agriculture is very often rain-fed. So if you have less rainfall that year and the crops are not good, the men will have to leave. So the connection between climate change, the droughts, and other climatic events is already at play at the moment in Ghana and in countries in the region. And we have to look at that. The whole agriculture discussion. This year at IOM, we were so happy that the theme for World Food Day was rural development as an answer to migration. And I think the whole nexus between food security, agriculture, and migration and climate change has to be looked at in a very holistic manner, because as long as young people will not see agriculture as a desirable area to get into, but at the same time this is the main area where employment can be created for them, we will have young people leaving every day to go into the irregular migration journey. So we really have to look at what is the situation for these farmers in these areas where a lot of migration is taking place. What is the situation with the social protection? Very often agriculture is not very resilient, because the first shock, no safety net, there's no access to value chains and to markets, there's no access to modern ways of farming, irrigation, financial inclusion is a problem, access to credits. So we really have to look at the agriculture situation in a very integrated way. If we disconnect the whole discussion, and very often we see that, we're saying, okay, you're saying that livelihood is a problem, then we fix livelihood. It has to be integrated. If we start with livelihood without thinking, why are we making this livelihood? It's to stabilize communities. If we miss that link and we divorce the two issues, we'll have that the initial influx of money may be used to migrate. If you are talking to communities where the social status that comes with migration, and when you go to the Brong-Ahafo region, there is a very high social status that comes with migration, whether you a former migrant yourself or whether you have a migrant in your family. So recently, one of the chiefs in the Brong-Ahafo region was telling me, but you know, these migrants, when they come back, they even want to steal the chief's wife. And it's very clear that your attractiveness as a person goes up with your migration status. So if we are talking about the root causes for migration being the livelihood, but also the social aspect, the cultural aspect. And in Brong-Ahafo you have all these houses that have been built by migrants. You have the cars. Who doesn't want that for themselves? Who doesn't want that for their families? Who doesn't want to build a house for their mother or for their father? So we have to have a credible counter-narrative. What are we offering? What are we putting on the table? The young people are very clear. When you tell them, don't go, it's dangerous, they will tell you, what do I do here? And some of them will be as brutally honest as telling you that I'm slowly dying here. So if I go and die there, it's 50% chance. What do you respond to that? So we have to be very clear in what we are putting out, and we have to be very clear that we need to work on the livelihood. We need to have solid proposals on the table for them, and we have to make agriculture desirable again. This is the reason why IOM has started a pilot farm in Koronza, where we have selected some young men in the region that were interested in migrating, and some young men who were returning, and we even have 2 women in the group. And we started a farm in Koronza with modern irrigation system with the support of a consultant to really see what would work in the region. So they have, after consultations with the traditional chiefs, with the farmers, with the local authorities, with the agric officials, they have settled on shallots, chili and watermelon, and they've started the farming process, and very soon I think they will be seeing the result of what they are doing. But the reason why we started that small pilot project was to make the demonstration that if you do agriculture, farming the right way, you can actually make a very decent living in Ghana with that money. And we are not talking huge sums of money. So we hope that more actors will come in to support us. We need to make connections between all the plans for economic growth and economic development need to be connected to this issue of irregular migration. We are not talking about a problem that is impacting just a small part of Ghana. We are talking about a project that is now spreading outside of traditional areas. So we have to use all the new programs that are being developed and thought out and conceptualized. They have to integrate this idea that they have a role to play in stabilizing the young people in the country.
Talking about programs, very often when we have international agreements, these large, big, ambitious international plans like the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement and the Migration Compact. And we have all of these initiatives that come with certain funding commitments. The challenge is working together with representatives of the international partners in country and government agencies to be able to distill all of those big plans into a country-specific initiative that allows both the agencies of government, the international agencies that are part of this network, and at the same time civil society and the private sector to find themselves working together collaboratively in that space to be able to actualize the intentions of these programs. With this new emphasis on investing in the youth, which was the focus of the last EU-AU summit, there's also a considerable amount of financing that is being made available to sort of de-risk European investment into Africa and to encourage the creation of new businesses in order to help to find some responses to this migration and employment challenge. From your experience working here in Ghana with an international organization, what do you think would be the things we could do differently to have better conceptualization and harmonization of national and international planning frameworks, and then the development of specific policy initiatives with clear ideas as to who is responsible for actioning what in order to achieve the intended outcomes? Because from my experience, I think that probably is our weakest link.
And I think the response to that is joint planning. Right? If you are trying to merge work plans that have been created separately and that you are trying to consolidate, you will manage to consolidate them, but along the process you would have lost the opportunity to have really the deep synergies and the integration that we need. And I think that is why it's important that we also have a strong governance of migration in the country, a whole of government and whole of society approach, so that we can sit around the table and look at what needs to be done. Because there is work that needs to be done in terms of vocational training, for example. How do we increase vocational training that is responsive to the labor market? This is not the area of expertise of migration experts. Right? So you have to bring non-traditional actors to sit at the table. You have to bring agri actors that are not used to work on migration to sit at the table, climate change actors, education. I really liked one portion of the Valletta Declaration, the political declaration, was saying what we need to give the youth in order to address this situation is better governance, peace, economic growth, access to services, education. It was a long list of all these things that are cross-cutting and that are so complex to achieve. And you thinking, how do you organize that in an ad hoc approach. And what we need to move away from is the ad hoc, is the patching and trying to tie things together when they've been thought through separately from the beginning. So really we have this very unfortunate events, those very unfortunate events that we have experienced in the past weeks. I think in everything there's a window of opportunity, and the window of opportunity that it's bringing to us, as I see it, is that new awareness of partners that didn't think that they had to work together around this. That new awareness in society. You have a lot of civil society organizations in Ghana working on irregular migration. And I think it was 2 years ago that we organized the first strategic dialogue on this topic. And all of them were quite amazed to see that others were also working on this topic. And some of them are becoming very vocal, very professional. And we've seen them recently also on TV participating in that conversation on irregular migration after the CNN videos and the return of the migrants last week. We need to create that space. We need to have that table where everybody can sit regularly and really be thorough in our analysis, but have the commitment that we are not discussing this today because this is the topic at the moment and it's dropped. I think Ghana is quite advanced in terms of the conceptualization, because we have a national migration policy that was supported by IOM. We have a Center for Migration Studies that a lot of other countries in the region do not have. So we have some very strong academics on migration in the country. We have to tap into all of that and into all these programs that are being discussed at the moment to see how they can be integrated in a very deep manner to address this issue.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you this evening, and I'm sure that my viewers have also been more enlightened, not only about some of the challenges that we are having to deal with, but also with some of the solutions that have been put in place and the work that needs to be done to coordinate more effectively, to be able to create legal routes for migration and at the same time shut down the criminal networks that facilitate this process. Thank you very much. Thank you and thank you to my viewers for being with us this evening. See you again next week. It's goodbye for now.